Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
It wouldn't be the holiday season if there wasn't candy, right? Celebrate the holiday season with the Holiday Crush. They've sprinkled candy with a holiday theme and fun-packed challenges every week for 5 whole weeks, finishing on January 4th. The more challenges you complete, the better your chances of unwrapping delicious rewards. So, are you ready to crush the holidays? Play the Holiday Crush now. Download it from the App Store, Google Play, or Windows Store for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht.
Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the German football podcast from the Football Grad Network. I'm your host, Bryce Dunn. And joining me, as always, is Manuel Veth. Manu, how have you been?
Yeah, pretty good. How about you, Bryce?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been a fun weekend. We've got plenty to talk about as always. We've even got a few questions from listeners on Twitter. So, yeah, I'm quite excited. But, joining the both of us, as always, I suppose, is Chris Williams.
Bryce, hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't hear you for a second, but can now. All good.
Oh, that's good. That's good that we've got you anyway. I thought maybe you'd just fallen asleep after that final game, the Hanover Wolves.
Oh, my word. What a dreadful game that was. Good goal, though. I'm sure we'll get to that. But, yeah, it wasn't a good game at all, was it? It was as bad as the pitch, as you pointed out.
Yeah, very much. That was bad. We should have known that it was possibly going to be that poor when we seen the state of that ground, didn't we? But, oh, yeah, it definitely didn't finish on a high this week, the Bundesliga action. But let's start right back at the start, all the way back to Friday evening, where we've seen a somewhat more entertaining and interesting game, where we've seen Eintracht Frankfurt, who have had a fantastic season so far, taking on Borussia Mönchengladbach, who have been a little bit up and down. The game finished 2-0. Frankfurt then were lifted to second in the table for a little bit. But let's talk about their opponents first. Borussia Mönchengladbach. I almost feel because we've had a loss to them that we should have John McKenzie on here, but we don't. Manu, let's go to you first though. What's causing this inconsistency in Gladbach? I mean, at times they look fantastic. Other times they just don't show up at all.
I thought they were a bit bland, for lack of better terms. I think that they just lack a little bit of creativity, and at the same time I also feel that you can really tell that they don't have an all-in-out striker in that lineup. Of course, Torgen Hazard playing up front, he's not really a striker. I mean, he is at best a false number 9. Lars Stindl is more the Thomas Müller kind of player, and when Raphael plays up there, he's a converted number 10 playing as a striker as well. So I think they just lack that the final punch through in the final third. It's really the biggest thing that is lacking in that side, and it has been lacking for quite some time. Because when you look at the rest of the side, they're very deep, but if you wanna win games, and if you wanna win against teams like Frankfurt, so well organized and defensively so difficult to play, I think you need someone who can just crack open the nut, and they don't have someone like that. I think that's really the number one criticism for me when it comes to Gladbach. And sometimes they're just a little bland to watch, and then other times they're just very exciting, and it's very difficult to see which of the two sides are showing up. But yeah, I thought, not the most exciting team. But I mean, they did also miss a penalty, right, Chris? So everything could have been worked out very, very different if they had scored that penalty.
Yeah, they were. I mean, I did their match report. Did a live blog on Football Start, and then the match report after it, which you can find on footballstart.com. But they were very, very poor. I had to spin 200 words out of that, Bryce, at one point. How poor Gladbach were. They just didn't seem at the races. That's a massive football cliche, but I'm going to use it. And I think it's because I was lucky enough to watch Frankfurt the week before. They just looked a more hungry side. They looked like they knew where they wanted to be, and the identity of this Gladbach side looks a little lost to me. And yeah, it's not really the team that strikes fear into anyone. The 4-4-2 they played, I thought, was very bland. The four across the middle weren't particularly that good. And then, as Manu said, Stindl dropped really deep. I mean, Stindl was so far deep at some point. He was at the edge of the centre circle. I mean, that's no good if you're playing two up front. Or even if you want to play, a 1-1, you can't have your striker that deep. But obviously he was looking for the ball, wasn't he? Because he was getting frustrated. But yeah, they were bullied. I mean, we all know Frankfurt are strong. And Manuel, we spoke a lot of times about how strong Frankfurt are. But again, they're very strong, and they just bullied them. I think they were lucky to get that penalty that Hazard missed. I didn't think it was on the replay, on a television replay, but yeah, nothing grabs me about Gladbach at the moment that goes, oh, they're an exciting side to watch.
Yeah, although we did think that this could be an exciting game, which it was, but not because of Gladbach, mostly because of what Frankfurt did in this game and has done for many weeks now. So we were excited about this game, but yeah, it's weird because Gladbach it could be an exciting side, I guess, but they really are not right now. It's an odd one for me. I think that where they are on the table at the moment, which is 7th, is about where I would rank them in terms of, I think that's a position that fits very well to their current strength. It's a fair position, I would say, for them at the moment.
I mean, we can give them their due. So obviously the match is 90 minutes long, but I thought they were poor for maybe 70 of that. Just after half time, they had a really, really good spell. The bar was hit. They had some fantastic attacking. Kissant's a French guy. He was very busy for about 10-15 minutes, but then they didn't get the goal they needed, and it's like they ran out of an idea, and then they sat back for some reason, and then Jovic, the substitute, came on and did exactly what he did in Wolfsburg when I was there last weekend, which was score a very late goal. So you can only applaud Niko Kovac's Frankfurt at the moment for playing very, very well, and they were at second, albeit only for 12 hours or so. But I think that's a good indication of how well they're doing this season, because I think it'll be interesting. We've said before, especially last season as well, and potentially the season before that, Frankfurt just dropped off rapidly from about now until May. So it'll be interesting to see how they cope with that, and if they finally got over that mindset, and can they put a run together, because I think they'd be a really good Europa League team, Manu.
Yeah, especially with what they're doing now. I think that they have learned from last year, and I feel that they are a very deep side, and Haller, of course, is someone, although he didn't score this time around, someone who we highlighted last week, but also Kevin Prince-Boateng was in the twilight of his career really finding his legs again. That goal he scored to open Frankfurt scoring was fantastic. It was such determination. He went into a ball that that's going to hurt when you go for that, and he did it regardless. And he fits that power football that Frankfurt play really well. And this go straight to the goal, very athletic, very powerful, overly aggressive at times football. Kevin Prince-Boateng fits that very well, and I think that goal pretty much for me underlined the way Frankfurt are playing right now, because it was a straight ball in, and Kevin Prince-Boateng, no prisoners taken, straight line to that goal, straight line for that ball, pounced on that ball, and boom, and you could hear that smack when that ball went in. You could just tell the power that was behind the execution, right? And I thought that very much underlined it for me, the way Frankfurt are playing. And Jovic's goal to seal the deal was pretty much the same thing. It was a straight line, powerful attack through the center, no nonsense, and a smacking shot, beautiful goal as well. And I think that Frankfurt right now, they look like that side that they have a lot of very good footballers in their team, and they have a coach that knows how to put them on the field. And I feel that with that side, they are not even on they haven't reached the ceiling yet. And I think that is something that is fascinating because, Europa League maybe, but they're currently fourth, Chris. I mean, Champions League might be a bit a step too far, but unlike last year, that fourth spot gets you straight into the group stage, right? It's a huge difference. So, and they have the kind of financial power, because of the city, that if they reach the Champions League, that could really set something in motion in Frankfurt, which is something that we were hoping for one of the big cities to happen in German football to begin with.
I just think the Champions League at the minute might be a competition too far for them. They remind me of a very clinical early 90s German side where, and I say this without any disrespect, but where it's not your free-flowing tippy-tappy, gegenpressing, tiki-taka, whatever you want to call it. It's very, very clinical football. It's very incisive. He just cuts teams apart and scores at will, and then he's very, very strong. It's almost like watching what I would call a traditional football side, and that's why I think the Champions League may leave them exposed, but the Europa League, where you get, the sides from, not that always that are in Europe's premier competition, or the sides that finish just outside, 6th, 7th, etc. I think they could do really, really well in that competition.
Well, guys, I suppose that brings us to the Twitter question we've received from one of our regular listeners. A Twitter handle @derlemke has asked, Eintracht Frankfurt, is their play of late sustainable? The game on Friday was a ton of fun to watch. We'll go back to you, Chris. Obviously, you were reporting on this one. Do you think they will be able to sustain this? You mentioned that last year they had a hell of a drop-off after Christmas. Do you see them then staying in these positions and possibly getting that European spot?
I can, actually, because last season they were beset by injury. If you remember what happened to Marco Fabian, and then he was out for so long, and that coincided with a really bad run for them. And we mentioned it on the last pod that they had a lot of ill discipline, their tempers boiled over, whereas they seem to have got that in check. And all right, they put 2 back-to-back victories together, which is a start of a good run. It's how can they develop from that? But at the moment, especially by the way I said a little bit earlier, it's the type of football that playing suits them 100%, which is if they want to hold onto the ball for 5 minutes, they can. And then all of a sudden they'll spot this forward pass, and it'll be one pass that'll cut the team in half, and they can score from it. And then they can sit back and just bully you out the game. So I think they can sustain it, especially, and Manu mentioned it last week, especially with all the players that they've got coming back roundabout now. It's a completely different season for them than last.
Yeah, Marco Fabian is still missing, Bryce, right? Someone we're really familiar with, and I think we can add even more to the side once he's fit. So I don't see it stop anytime soon. And next week's match is in Augsburg, and that's, I'm not saying it's going to continue, but it's a doable opponent for them, right? And I think that's also going to be a bit of a test for them, because beating someone like Gladbach who actually plays football is one thing, but Augsburg, then that will really show if that run is sustainable. And I think deeper we get into the Rückrunde, the more we can see how much Kovac has learned from the things that happened last year. And we talk about the injuries is one thing, and I think a lot of the injuries were probably down to the way they were playing, and the lack of squad depth that they had. But it was also a lot of the players were missing because of a yellow and red card epidemic, which was also down to their playing style. And it's going to be interesting to see if Niko Kovac has learned from that, from last season, and if he is drawn the right conclusions and can carry that momentum that they have deeper into the second half of the season. And I think that's really, really something that we need to watch over the coming weeks.
It certainly is exciting times for Eintracht. If we look back, they've actually not been beaten their last 5. The last time they lost was to Bayern Munich, which is no mean feat whatsoever, as we know. So things are definitely looking positive. Manu, just to go back, Niko Kovac, is he being linked with any bigger clubs after a hell of a season so far? I mean, seems like anyone that has a run of positive games seems to get linked with the likes of the bigger clubs in the league and in Europe.
Well, there's this list that went around just before Christmas, possible Bayern replacements, and he was on that list. But he's been very outspoken about the fact that he's not going to Bayern next year. And I believe it. And it's interesting that Freddie Bobic, the sporting director, in the meantime has said he knows who the new head coach is going to be. And we're all very well networked in the business. And we all know who it is going to be. And then that down. But it's, where there's smoke, there's fire, right, Chris? We've seen that so many times that when a name like that, when someone mentions something like that, they usually seem to know a little bit more. It was the same with Mario Basler, predicting that Ancelotti would be gone soon, and then soon after it happened. These people usually do know a little bit about what is happening and what's going on.
Interesting indeed. Yeah, I suppose we'll know all in good time what happens with the Bayern job. But guys, just one last question I suppose I have on Gladbach, and that was we mentioned that possible striker is where the problem lies at the moment. I mean, you've got Bobadilla and Raphael both out injured, unsure as to when exactly they'll come back. I mean, Chris, would it have made a big difference if the likes of Bobadilla, an out-and-out striker, had been on the pitch for them on Friday? And with us not knowing when they're going to be back, do you see them possibly bringing in a striker before the transfer window closes?
Well, I don't know if a striker would have helped them on Friday because they were feeding off scraps. So it was the midfield for me that weren't able to provide the forwards with any sort of meat on the bones, I suppose. So will it have helped on Friday night? Maybe if they would have had a big target man, 6'2", 6'3", someone like Anthony Modeste, and they could have played a little bit like Cologne did last season, which was go long when they needed to on occasion. I think that could have worked, but it's a hard one, Bryce. I mean, who do they bring in? Because I don't know if it's all about the striker. I think they have no identity at the moment, and it's going to be telling for them because all I can see them is slipping down the league a little bit further. I mean, they're 7th at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if they were 8th next week. Yeah,
it is that close, isn't it? We'll just have to see what way that pans out. But guys, let's move on to a team which are having no problems. Nobody's near them, and that's Bayern Munich. Chris, you covered for Footballgrad Network the game against Hoffenheim. Julian Nagelsmann was hoping to set a bit of a record by going unbeaten once again against them, but that didn't happen even though they were 2-0 up at the start of the game. The game finished 5-2. Chris, how entertaining was this?
Bryce, this was a real treat for me. I haven't watched Bayern Munich live since I was up at Celtic for the Champions League game when we did that live from Celtic Park, which was a fantastic experience. So it's the first time I've seen them live. I've only seen them on catch-ups. I've either done other teams or I've been keeping my eye on Dortmund. And do you know what? It was a real thrill to watch Bayern play. I thought they were excellent, apart from the first 12 minutes when they were dreadful. And we've said it on occasion that Bayern looked beatable at times. And that first 12 minutes, they were horrendous. And Hoffenheim, quite rightly, rifled into a 2-goal lead. But then I said at the end of the match, Bayern did what Bayern do best, and they almost went, actually, it's taken 2 goals for us to go down here. We need to wake up. And the next 12 minutes, they turned it round. And once that second one went in, once Boateng got that second goal, it was only going to end one way, this game. And Hoffenheim went to pieces a little bit like when I saw them at Anfield in the Champions League. They just completely went to pieces. Unbelievable. And it was a really, really good game. If you're looking for a game to sell the league, this was it, because it was back and two. Even when Bayern were up 3 and even 4-2, Hoffenheim didn't just sit back, they went and had a go, which I think is a real good positive for Nagelsmann and his side, is they weren't happy to just sit back and go, I'll tell you what, we'll just close the door now and we'll take a 3-2 defeat here and we'll get away with our tail between our legs. They did look for it, but Bayern's class outdid them in the end, and there was a beautiful passage of play which resulted in a fantastic goal, and they were a real joy to watch, and I very much enjoyed it. And watching Arturo Vidal as well, he was my man of the match. He was just omnipresent, Bryce. It was a fantastic game to watch.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Manu, we did mention that Julian Nagelsmann was very close, wasn't he, to being joined in the record books with the longest sustained undefeated record as a coach. Is that correct?
longest sustained undefeated record to start your career with against Bayern.
Okay.
Only Ernst Happel and what do I have down? Kuhn. And Ernst Happel, of course, is one of the most legendary coaches in the European game. So they managed to stay unbeaten in their first 4 games against Bayern. And it took Bayern 5 games each time to defeat the respective manager. Nagelsmann, I guess, when they were up 2-0, we all thought that might happen. But yeah, Chris, I'm kind of jealous that you got to cover this one. It looked like a lot more fun than the game I got to cover, but I guess I got to cover Bayern so much, so sooner or later I had to bite into the sour apple and take another one. And I think that Bayern get a lot of stick, including from us, for what they do with the league, with the players that they sign and the players that they bring in. But then at the same time, when you watch them play and you see them perform, it's one thing to be complaining about all the records and the records that they hold and the records that they win and currently what they're doing with the dominance over the league. But maybe it's also just time to sit back and look at it and say, well, this is amazing stuff. We're seeing football history written here right in front of our eyes. We're seeing a team play possibly the most efficient football in all of Europe. And I guess there is a beauty in that, and something that we sometimes doesn't maybe get acknowledged often enough, because Jupp Heynckes took over the side and really turned them around in amazing fashion. And at times when they play, you must have seen that too, Chris, right? They just turn on one gear up and then it's just incredible what they do. It's just absolutely unexplainable unless you've seen it live, best possibly in the stadium, where you just see them go into action and just do what they do best, which is just to win games. And I think I wouldn't even say that they necessarily, there's other teams in this league that have similar talent, but for some reason they just have that mentality to get the job done, which is something that you don't often see in world football.
No, you don't. And there's a great instance of this where Hoffenheim were just starting to come back into the game after half time, and then they just hit another gear. They all of a sudden just stepped up and they hit Hoffenheim on the break, but it was so clinical and it was such good football. And Lewandowski just fed a delightful ball to Koeman, and he just drilled it. And I put in a match report, he drilled it from the edge of the box, and it was fantastic because he just skipped past Veth if he wasn't there. It's hard to criticize it because it's really good football to watch, and they are still a little beatable, and we've seen that on occasion, especially the earlier part of the season. And for the first 12 minutes of this match, they looked awful. But as we both said, it's that ability and that mentality to just flick into a title-winning side, and that's what they did, and they just steamrolled them away after that. And it must be a horrible thing to be as an away side in the Allianz, and if you're 2 goals up and you're on top of the world, and all of a sudden those 2 goals come back very quickly, that pitch will be twice as big in a matter of minutes, and you will feel all the pressure from around you, and the crowd is very noisy as well. It's a real melting pot to play in, and it was a real joy to cover Bayern, and I shall probably do it a little bit more often now than I have done previously.
We can get anything delivered, from furniture to toilet paper. And now, adult beverages with Drizzly. Drizzly lets you compare prices from local liquor stores on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your door in under 60 minutes. And right now, Drizzly's giving all new customers $5 off their first order. Just enter promo code EASY5 at checkout. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com.
In this game, seen the 5th goal come from Sandro Wagner, who got his first goal for the club since his return. Wagner, after the game, declared that he was the best German striker at present. Chris, would you agree with that? Is he the best at the moment? We always talk about Timo Werner being possibly the best of ones lead the line when they go to the World Cup. But also, how important is it that for Bayern that they keep him fit and in goal-scoring form for the rest of the season, especially with the Champions League?
Well, it's very important they keep him fit because he came on with a point to prove, and he scored his goal that he got, and I like to see it, Bryce, because he'd been at Hoffenheim, but he wasn't one of these muted celebrations. He was running up to the crowd and banging a badge on his shirt, so he was very happy that he scored, and he's obviously very happy to be at Bayern. Do I think he's the best German striker at the moment? No, not at all. Timo Werner is head and shoulders above him, and I think if I was Joachim Low, Timo Werner would be my starting man up front. I wouldn't change that as a fact. Sandro Wagner called himself the best striker in German football last season and then went on a horrendous downturn of form. So he probably should have learned from saying that from last season. I mean, no doubt he's going to be a crucial element to this Bayern side, especially as you mentioned with the Champions League coming on. Obviously, they're still going all guns in the Pokal as well, and they'll have an eye on doing the treble. So he will be needed for that, and he'll probably now get quite a few games in the Bundesliga because they're 16 points clear, and they'll be able to mix and match their squad a little bit with big games coming up midweek. So I'd expect him to get a lot more chances, but I don't think he's the best striker, best German striker at the moment. But he has got the potential now he's at Bayern to maybe become one of the best.
And we've obviously sang the praises of Julian Nagelsmann several times over. But what exactly is happening with Hoffenheim at the moment? We spoke about it a little bit last week, but they failed to get a victory in 4 games now, and just a little bit concerning their form. I mean, I suppose losing to Bayern Munich, as I said, is no mean feat. But next week they might be happier to play someone like Hertha Berlin.
Yeah, I guess they've been found out a little, and I mean, basically, I stick with all the things that I said last week on the podcast. That I feel that Julian Nagelsmann is doing a little bit of growing up right now in front of for everyone to see live on camera, and that's fine. I mean, he's a 30-year-old coach, and I don't want to say he's not talented because he is. He's a massive. He is. He will have a world career ahead of him. But, it's not always happy times in the Bundesliga, and this profession is brutal. Football is a brutal business. And I think at the moment he's just he's getting to learn the other side of it a little bit, which is, I think, if he draws the right conclusion out of it, it's just going to be fine for him. I think if you go up 2-0 against Bayern and you lose 5-2, that can happen, but at the same time, we've seen last year, for example, that would be enough for them to win a game. And maybe that's just something that he's found out a little bit. Someone like Jupp Heynckes, who's very experienced. It's really remarkable that this 70-year-old coach is basically teaching all these young guns in the Bundesliga a massive lesson at the moment. And I think Julian Nagelsmann is one of them. So, Bryce, I think he's still going to have a great career ahead of him, but I think he's just doing a little bit of learning right now.
Yeah, that's it. I think there's 42 years, the difference between the two coaches when they met at the weekend, which was something else, isn't it? But Manu, you've been at it again. You've been on Twitter. You've been doing your Twitter polls. This week, a little bit about Goretzka coming into the Bayern squad, meaning that it may cause an end to a Bayern career for another midfielder in Thiago or Vidal. Chris just pointed out, and I can confirm on SofaScore as well when I was looking on my stats app, that Vidal seemed to have a fantastic game this weekend. But what are the polls saying? What's your opinion on this?
Well, my thing. Well, this was widely reported in Kicker. So Bayern are looking with Goretzka coming in, either Thiago or Vidal is going to leave at the end of the season. That seems to be the consensus because they have so many midfielders, right? I put the question to my Twitter users and asked them whether the club should sell Thiago or Vidal, and 72% said they should sell Vidal. But I mean, Chris is quite right. When you look at Vidal's statistics, he's been incredible, and when you look at Thiago, I mean, the guy is a great footballer, but he's unfortunately also made out of glass. I don't think he's managed a single season at Bayern without an injury. On some of the seasons were significant injuries where he missed more than half a season, right? And Arturo Vidal, he is a hothead, but he's also very reliable. I've seen him a few times now live at the Allianz, and I think he's been incredible since Jupp Heynckes came in, and he was very good yesterday as well, wasn't he, Chris?
Yeah, it was my man of the match. It was everywhere. Obviously, he had a rocky start. They all did, but after that, he was just. He was omnipresent. Said it a little bit earlier. He's omnipresent, and he was relentless. He bullied the Hoffenheim midfield. He was pulling the strings, feeding the ball forward, feeding it sideways, feeding it backwards. He was just there. But what he brings, not only is he this big, strong guy that can defend, but when the ball's in the other end of the box, he's a massive threat, and he must just be a privilege to coach, I think, because he can do it all. And when he's on top of his game, he's brilliant. But you're quite right, Manu. He has got a hot head. I mean, looking at him in the Champions League last season, and both those games against Real Madrid, he lost his head big time, and you could argue that's why Bayern went out in the end.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm not sure it's actually nailed down that Thiago will survive Vidal at the club, because it's that injury history, and Thiago's only played 9 times this year, right? Last couple of seasons were a little bit better. He played 27 times and 27 times, so a bit more consistent. But in his first year, he only played 16 times. So you almost wonder, right? I guess Thiago is only 26, so you get a lot more time out of him. But Arturo Vidal brings something to the side that's going to be really difficult to replace if he leaves. And that's that edge, that fire, right? And Jupp Heynckes seems to be a lot better at managing it than Carlo Ancelotti was last season. And yes, Vidal's eventual sending off did cost Bayern that semi-final, but it was also Carlo Ancelotti who forgot to take him off in the first place, which is something Jupp Heynckes never made that mistake. Remember the Pokal against Leipzig, Vidal was off after, he came close to that second yellow card. Heynckes took him straight off. He seems to be just a bit better at managing the fire that Vidal brings to a pitch. And then I personally, I have to admit it, I'm a big Arturo Vidal fan. I even wrote an article on him a few weeks ago. I called it the art of football brutalism, because I think he does supply something that is very, very necessary for a team to be successful, which is that hard edge combined with technical ability and a little bit of leadership. Sometimes you need that player that strikes a little bit of fear into the opponent. And Bayern always had players like that when they were successful. I mean, keep in mind, Stefan Effenberg and Van Bommel were 2 names that you wouldn't mess with, but could at the same time still play very good football.
For me, I would keep him and I'd move Thiago out, and that's purely based, like what Manu said, Bryce, on his injury history. I know he's a lot younger; he's a few years younger. But if you're gonna ship Vidal out and keep Thiago, and maybe only play 10-15 matches for the next 3 seasons on average, that's a bit of a waste for me. You could keep Vidal for an extra 2 years, maybe even 3 at a push, because he keeps himself in really good shape, and then look for someone to come along in that time span to replace him, because I don't think he would. I don't think he would, not replace him as such, but you put Goretzka around Vidal in and around those areas, I think you've got a really good side. I just think that Vidal's pivotal, especially to the Bayern side that I watched on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that there's a bigger market for Thiago too. You could get a lot of money for Thiago if you sell him to Barcelona, Paris, or one of the English clubs. Whereas for Vidal, I'm not sure Bayern get the money that they spend on him back.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said about having one of those harder midfielders, so right in the middle, while you've got then your flair players around. I think there's definitely something to be said for it, even though Vidal has a lot more to offer than just that, doesn't he? But guys, let's move on to another player that we're not sure whether he's going to stay or whether he's going to go. But there's plenty of talk, as always, in this transfer windows about him, and that's Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Borussia Dortmund. We've seen Dortmund slip to a 3rd draw in a row over the weekend against Freiburg with a late goal, managing it to make it 2-2. Aubameyang was back in the starting lineup, controversially. I spoke to you, Manu, about this, didn't I? And I wasn't too happy about him being in there, but hence is the way football goes, I suppose. I mean, how was he, and what's your thought about him being straight back into the starting lineup? I mean, is he going now? Is he going to stay, or?
Oh, so he was actually playing, because I didn't notice him. Jokes aside.
I wouldn't say that to him on Twitter, anyway.
No, but if you do what he did in the last little while, I think it's just fair that there is criticism towards him. He had one chance, a header that landed on the roof of the goal. Other than that, he tried. I mean, he did try. But he was largely invisible. I didn't think he was very much involved in this game. And I don't know if we can really actually blame him entirely for this. I thought that Dortmund lacked creativity throughout, and that they were actually, although they bossed possession, they seemingly seemed to dominate Freiburg. They didn't have any idea on how to crack that nut. The two defensive lines that Freiburg was putting around the penalty box. And Freiburg were really clever, and I actually felt that every time Freiburg went forward, they were the more dangerous side. Every single time. And when Freiburg scored that second goal, I pretty much already had my match report written up, saying that Freiburg has finally won their first game after 17 years in Dortmund, which would have been only the second win in the Signal Iduna Park overall. And then Jeremy Toljan rescued a point. I think, of course, this was gutting for Freiburg, but at the same time, I still feel that this felt like a defeat for Dortmund, because the side lacks everything at the moment. It starts with this whole Aubameyang affair, but it ends with the lack of creativity in midfield, and the defensive line is an absolute shambles. Nuri Sahin, the way he lost the ball is one thing, but then Bürki not tracking back in time is another thing. You could see Socrates making these needless runs forward without passing off the ball. It was head through the wall. This entire squad doesn't seem coherent. And I don't think that's down to the coaches. And I mean, Bosch or Stöger. I think the side is not put together well at the moment. There's a bunch of players adored by the fans and are not in that squad for merit, and then there's a bunch of players who see it as an in-between step to go somewhere else, and then there's that group of players that want to be there, very talented but don't have a voice. And I think that kind of fragmentation is very visible on the pitch right now, and I think that is something that Dortmund need to fix one way or another. But right now, the way the squad is put together, and I said this, I think, in the WhatsApp chat, I think that there's actually, talented-wise, when you just look at the pure talent of this side, they should be competing with Bayern for the championship. But I think there is something very wrong with the atmosphere in the dressing room. And I think there is such a fragmentation inside the dressing room. And it worked under Tuchel. It was sort of kept together. And then Bosch and Stöger, well, Bosch is such a nice guy. He wasn't able to keep it together. And now Stöger has come in, of course, and he's presented with this mess. I imagine it almost like someone spilling Mikado sticks all over a floor, and he has to piece it all together and figure out a squad from all this. And I don't know if there is enough time to do this, and whether selling Aubameyang, that one piece, to fit it all together again, if that's gonna work. It's a massive mess at the moment, I feel, and I'm not sure how to fix it. That's all the other things aside, right? But that's just it for me. The squad composition right now just seems completely off.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the Aubameyang, performance the other day, he's a one shot, failed to get it on target. He's a one cross, incomplete, and he's only had 10 passes. Though, as you said, Manu, that's not necessarily his fault. As such, it could be the midfield, which there's a bit of controversy over, wasn't there, with Nuri Sahin. coming into the starting 11 when people would have expected Weigl to be on there when he was left on the bench. But Chris, I'm going to go to you. We've got another Twitter question. This is from at David_Patch19. He says, Dortmund playmakers, misused or lack of support?
Great question. I'm going to say a bit of both. Under Peter Bosz, I think they were misused. And now at the moment, I think they've got a little bit of lack of support. I'm in full agreement. You mentioned there about Sahin and Weigl. Yes, Julian Weigl, I think maybe if he'd played in that defensive midfield role where Sahin started at, may have been a different game on a Saturday. But you've got to remember that Dortmund were at home to Freiburg, not a particularly strong side. And as Manu said, you look at those players who Dortmund have got on the pitch. Just look at the front three: Sancho, Aubameyang, Pulisic. Immense talent throughout the three of them. Kagawa, Castro, Sahin, very talented mid three. Although you could argue, does Julian Weigl come in there? Mario Götze, obviously he's not particularly well at the moment, so he's getting back into it. He came on a little bit later, a little bit higher. And then, the back isn't too bad at the moment. It's just something is not happening. So for me, it's a little bit of misuse, and I'll say that Weigl should have played on Saturday, especially watching the highlights. And then I'm going to say it's a lack of support, and that goes back to what Manu said. This team reminds me at the moment, Manu, of, do you remember the Dutch side in the, I think it was the late 90s or the early noughties, where they had 23 squad and 23 fantastic individual players, but they couldn't do anything because they were always infighting. And that was the Dutch national side. And that's what this reminds me of. Players who aren't happy. So Aubameyang's not happy, and that's evident, and he didn't look happy in the highlights that I saw. So that's going to affect those around him. And it's going to cause little breaks inside the changing room, inside the changing room. So there's going to be sides being taken there, which is very similar to what Holland had a few years back. So it's also who comes on. Yarmolenko, I don't think has settled as well as he should have done. Alexander Isak is a fantastic prospect, but he's very young. Schürrle has been a mistake. I think that was a really bad bit of recruitment at the start of the season for Schürrle. I don't think he's been particularly good. And yeah, it's hard. And I don't think it's Peter Stoger's fault. It was John McKenzie actually said, is it time? Did I think Stoger out? No, not at all. I just think that he's been asked to settle instantly in a side where he doesn't have any time, because this side should be, by rights, second or maybe even first. Don't forget the massive gap they had at the start of the season. They certainly shouldn't be sitting in sixth. They should be third or second at the moment. And you could argue that even with Bayern's upturn under Heynckes, that they should really still be challenging them. But it just all fell apart for Dortmund, and it's been a hard watch, if you like, Borussia Dortmund at the moment. But I don't think it's Stoger's fault. I'm with you, Manu. I think it's above that. It's Vakra and Zorc who maybe haven't brought in who they should have done, and they themselves criticised the players today, which I think was a warranted and quite a valid criticism, wasn't it, Manu?
Yeah, Berkey criticized the fans after the game for whistling, and then Zorc said, I recommend every player to watch the game, the full 90 minutes on either television or a laptop, and I'm sure they would have to be careful not to whistle themselves. And I did watch this game, and yes, Freiburg were clever, they really were, and a part of me was even rooting for them to get the win, because I thought that the match plan worked very well. But when you look at this talented side, they're so fragmented. I love your Netherlands comparison, by the way, Chris. I think that's bang on. That's exactly what's going on. It's a group of individuals right now. Dortmund is not a team, and I think that's the bottom line. But then you look at recruitment, right? Who is in charge of recruitment? Where they may be too focused on just finding the next big gem rather than piecing together a puzzle. And this side is, you look at Sancho, the things that he does at times, it's just beautiful. Same with Pulisic, incredible stuff. Kagawa is an artist, but they don't play together. And same with Götze, when he came on, all of a sudden there's the spark. You see these passes played out of or with the ankle. It's just like beautiful curl passes, beautiful passes played, but it's just, there is no determination. There's no end product. And it's telling that both goals were sort of scored by mistake. And, that Dutch comparison is great. I think that should be even the title of this podcast, BVB, the new Oranje, because that's exactly what's going on. And I think that is down to recruitment. They were too focused on finding Europe's next big gem rather than actually putting together a squad. And that's a harsh criticism, but I stick with it.
And by the look of it this evening, that's what they're going to continue doing. Who they've been linked with now, the young guy from Barcelona, Sergio, what's his last name, Bryce?
Gomez.
Sergio Gomez, thank you. Is he the right guy to bring in right now to try and drive Borussia Dortmund up the table, or is he one for the next 2 to 3 seasons?
He's got to be for the future, right? I mean, the kid's 17. He's played in the some people may remember his name, or it may, I don't know, it may resonate with them after the Under-17 World Cup where he played against England. They lost 5-2 Spain, but he scored both goals, actually, both the opening goals. So, but at the age of 17, surely they couldn't possibly be relying on him or expecting him to be an Aubameyang replacement, I would say. But, guys, I just want to ask the question. I mean, we obviously said that there's a lot of troubles, it seems, in the Dortmund dressing room, and hopefully they can iron them out rather soon. But where do you both see Dortmund finishing the end of the season? They've drew the last 3 games. If they had have won those games, they'd be sitting 3 points clear in second, which you can say about a lot of teams in a lot of positions. But really, I mean, a 0-0 draw against Wolfsburg, a 1-1 draw against Hertha, and then a 2-2 draw against Freiburg. These are games that they should always be expected to win. Let's go to you first, Manu. Where do you see them finishing on the table if you're to take a punt?
Right now, 6th. This sounds really harsh, and they need the Champions League football, but if they play like this, with all the things that are going on, how are they going to win games? Or consistently enough win games to be better than the 4 teams that are ahead of them in the standings? Remember, there's only 3 Champions League spots left. And yes, Leipzig have been slumping a little bit too, but Frankfurt, Schalke, Leverkusen have been consistently winning games, and Dortmund haven't. So I cannot imagine them not finishing a Champions League spot, but that's where I see them finishing right now.
What about you, Chris? Where do you see Dortmund finishing? Do you see them climbing above any of the teams above them?
Right now, I am in full agreement with Manu. I think they'll finish 6th. And I go that by Leverkusen are playing a lot more exciting football. They look like a team. Schalke look like a team. Even Eintracht Frankfurt, who I've watched twice now within the last week, they look like a team, although their football isn't the prettiest. It's getting results. I think they are where they are. The table doesn't lie, and I can see them fighting out with Leipzig and Gladbach for one of those 2 Europa League slots.
Yeah, not so good for Dortmund. Then I suppose my follow-up question, which I'm going to turn around and say, next time out they're going to be playing on the Friday night game away to Cologne. Cologne obviously have a little bit of momentum. I think Cologne are good for a draw here. How do you guys feel if we just quickly answer this one before we move on?
I think Cologne will be good for a win on that price at home. They'll be up for that.
Wow. Especially against Stoker, eh?
It's the 2nd of February. At least we will have some conclusion on what happens to Aubameyang. But Köln are fighting for their lives, and Dortmund are doing something. It's not playing football as a unit. So we might get this massively wrong, but I think Chris might be right. I think Köln could aim for all 3 points there.
Well, that'd be massive for Cologne, wouldn't it? Guys, so let's move over to another club in a bit of turmoil at the moment in Stuttgart. We pointed out previously how they had struggled after a very bright start. They've lost their last 2 games, and we've finally seen them part ways with Hans Wolf. Manu, what does this mean for them? Do you think changing coach at this time is the right move for them? I mean, he did lead them to promotion.
Bryce, I had such high hopes ahead of the season for Stuttgart. I'm a big fan of Reschke. I did an article for Breaking the Lines and on Reschke, and I had such high hopes with the things that they were doing, the players that we were bringing in, a young and exciting coach. And unfortunately, Stuttgart are Stuttgart, and they always seem to fire their coach at this point of the season. Remember, they did it last year too, even when they got promoted. And it's just, I don't know what it is up with Swabians. They seem to be very good at saving money, but they're not good when it comes to building football teams long term, because this is a move that makes no sense for me. Yes, they didn't win many games lately, but they're still 3 points ahead in the relegation spot. I feel that Hannes Wolf as a coach is a good coach. He's a tactical, very good coach. I feel that with Mario Gomez coming in, they made the right signings. And I think that he would have deserved at least another game against Wolfsburg, because, if you win against Wolfsburg, then things look very different. And I think that's beatable opponent for them. So I was very surprised. There was suggestions yesterday that this could happen already. And then they had a long out discussion, and they went into the meeting 50-50 on whether Wolf is going to stay or not, and came out with Wolf being fired. And Reschke actually tried to protect Wolf. The president, Dietrich, he's a very good businessman. He's not a football specialist, and I think it showed with this decision. I personally think it's the wrong choice. And I hope that, because I have high hopes for Stuttgart. Chris, we've both been to the stadium. It's a fantastic place to watch football. And it's a kind of city that I hope that one day could return to the Champions League, because Stuttgart is such a great place in terms of football. But that is a club that's not making good decisions at times. And I think there's because there's too many people that are very good at business, but very poor at making football decisions, making too many big decisions in this club.
Excellent place. Awful Wi-Fi.
First world problems, Chris? I suppose the cakes were bad as well at half time.
Well, there was just a pretzel at half time, but let's not go into that. But when you're trying to do a match report and your Wi-Fi goes down, it's quite bad. I mean, don't feel sorry for me. Feel sorry for the data analyst sat next to me that had to call all his data transfers in by phone. What a nightmare that was for him. But I mean, joking aside, they're in a bad situation, aren't they? And you can almost understand why they've done it. They're sitting 14th place, 20 points. That awful relegation slot is only 17, so but 3 behind them. And then maybe they've got one eye on FC Köln, because all of a sudden they've got 13 points, Bryce, and they could be on the ascendancy. And Stuttgart, when I went to see them just before Christmas, before the Christmas break, the winter break against Bayern, I thought they played all right in patches, but it was the quality wasn't really there. And maybe if they finish 14th, if they finished in May where they are now, I think that's a good season. If you return into the Bundesliga, it's a season you can build upon, and maybe look to finish 12th the season after that, and then look to bring in different players and maybe push on and finish 10th. They're not one of these sides that's going to go from 14th or be promoted and go straight into Champions League football. If they've had one eye on what RB Leipzig have done, then they're in dreamland, because they haven't approached the game the same way that Leipzig did. So I suppose only time will tell, but I can understand why they've done what they've done and why they've sacked Wolf. But it's who they bring in really that's going to drag them out of that. Who's available right at this second that can come in and change it without getting a coach from the league below, which works sometimes and unfortunately doesn't. Not everybody's a Dominic Tedesco.
No, definitely not. Manuel, have we heard who's going to come in and replace him, or have you got any ideas who would be a good replacement?
Well, I can only do what everyone else is doing, which is speculating. Which the names that have come up is David Wagner from Huddersfield, Tayfun Korkut. Remember him, guys?
Oh, what? Guys. No way. Might as well give it to me. I'd
be just excited to have him back, just for you to struggle pronouncing his name. Bryce.
I'm not having that again. I'm not having that. That would have been the perfect blooper reel, I think, last season. But
that podcast had to be registered over 18 only that week, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Thank you for that, Chris.
Yeah. But and then Slaven Bilic, remember him? He's another one. And Heidenheim's coach, Frank Schmidt, who I personally I can't see that happening because Frank Schmidt is on a lifelong contract at Heidenheim. Yes, those things exist. He actually has an unlimited contract there, and he's been there for ages. He is the club. So I don't. He would be a good fit because he's from the region, but I just can't see him going for that. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, Typhoon Korkut, I'd be shocked. I think that would be a bad decision. For all those who want to know why, listen back to our Bayer Leverkusen podcast from last week. There's a few. And I just can't see that happening. But I mean, David Wagner, if he does give up his Huddersfield job, this I could actually see him do it for this one because Stuttgart is a great city, big city. There's a lot of money there, and he would be working with a fantastic sporting director.
Interesting. We'll have to see what happens there in the next few days. But a side that has benefited from a coach change is Hamburg, actually, who managed to get a 1-1 draw away to RB Leipzig, which is a pretty good result. That's the result of coach Bernd Hollerbach coming in. I mean, we always joke, don't we, about that clock in the ground, that relegation clock looking down on the players. But this week it seemed to be a good thing for them. Though in saying that, the other relegation candidates all seem to get a draw in Werder Bremen and Cologne. Chris, a bit of a new coach bounce, it would seem.
What a draw. I don't know. I mean, if you look back now, I think that's more an opportunity missed for Leipzig to be 2 points further up the table, which would put the, I think, can we call it joint second on goal, just behind on goal difference. It's not looking good for Hamburg. I still think that this is the season for them. They're falling behind now. I mean, look, they're only 3 points behind. They're only 3 points in front of Cologne. And if we predict what we predicted earlier, which is Dortmund are in a bit of a mess and Cologne are in the ascendancy, they could be with, let's say they beat Dortmund 2-0. On Saturday morning, Hamburg will be rock bottom.
Wow. That would be something else, wouldn't it? I mean, we never would have predicted this just a few match days ago, but things are getting very exciting down the opposite end of the table, aren't they, Manu?
Yeah, they are. And I mean, it's not the Hamburg result. I actually think that a point against Leipzig is not enough because Leipzig have been struggling quite a bit. Some similar issues to Dortmund playing wise. Of course, Leipzig is struggling because Forsberg is out and long term, and they now on Poulsen, I believe, is out long term too. So they're now looking actually into I forgot Halstenberg as well. So they're actually looking into bringing someone in because the squad is very thin, which is something we discussed, right? So I think actually Hamburg missed an opportunity there to win. So I'm with Chris, 100%. Werder, I watched that game against Hertha, and those are 90 minutes that I want back. It was a poor game. I spent most of that game discussing VAR and why VAR was correctly used. And I got into an argument with a couple of Werder Bremen fan accounts. And fortunately for me, I got the backing from the biggest refereeing Twitter account there is out there, which is Colinas Erben. And I said that the VAR was correctly used in this, and they said exactly the same thing. It was the right decision because actually when I watched this on replay, and I'm curious to hear what you think, Chris, I thought the yellow card, and Colinas Erben says, yes, yellow card was the correct decision on the elbow. But when you go up like that and the elbow goes out, that's borderline red for me. I think it was correct that they called it back, but I think they could have maybe even turned this into a red card. And which of course would have even angered the Werder Bremen fans even more.
Oh, yeah, you lead with your elbow. It's a red card for me all day. So, yeah, they're very lucky. But that's what VAR was brought in for, wasn't it? I mean, maybe not to look at everything in such minor detail. And there's a few problems in England with it over the weekend, and it's teething. But when it's right, I find it hard for people to argue against it, as in, oh, well, it's been pulled back there and it shouldn't have been. Well, quite clearly it should, because it works. Yeah,
and that's it. And it seems like across the water, England seem to be enjoying VAR at the moment as well, don't they? So it's hot topics as always. But guys, I think that more or less does it for this week's podcast. We've managed to cram in quite a bit, haven't we? But it seems like more entertaining spots seem to be away from Bayern Munich and more towards the middle and bottom of the table. Manu, what have you got going on this week? You always have plenty going on.
We have 3 days left in a transfer window, so I think that's what we're going to mostly focus on. But yeah, Golazzo podcast back on Monday, recording Football Grad on Tuesday, and the usual articles, coming your way on at Football Grad Live.
Yeah, there's always plenty going on at Football Grad Live account on Twitter. Chris, what have you got going on this week? Anything you'd like to draw people's attention to?
Well, obviously I'll be covering the Friday night game, Cologne against Dortmund, and then one of the Saturday games. Although we do have a better Sunday, don't we, next week? Slightly better Sunday. I certainly won't be watching Hamburg against Hanover, Bryce, after this weekend. But I wrote an article which is on Fußballstat, which is why the Bundesliga seems to be looking at England at the moment for its youth talent, and why is that youth talent not really getting the opportunity in England? So I wrote a little bit about that. And then I've got all the match reports and live blogs which you can look back over from this weekend, and that's all at fußballstat.com.
Yeah, very good. And yeah, as you said, we've got some interesting games coming up next week. You're obviously going to be covering the Cologne versus Dortmund one. We've all predicted that things will probably go well for Cologne, but even the late kickoff on Saturday, Gladbach versus RB Leipzig, that could be an exciting one as well. But that more or less does it for this week, guys. Thank you for tuning in. If you have a moment, please head over to the likes of iTunes and give us some positive feedback. We'd really appreciate that. And yeah, send us a tweet. Any of us a tweet. You feel free to ask some questions. We'll try and discuss them on the podcast or get back to you on Twitter. I've been your host, Bryce Dunn. You can find me on Twitter at BryceDunn11. And until next week, auf Wiedersehen.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen, dich abzuholen.
It wouldn't be the holiday season if there wasn't candy, right? Celebrate the holiday season with the Holiday Crush. They've sprinkled candy with a holiday theme and fun-packed challenges every week for 5 whole weeks, finishing on January 4th. The more challenges you complete, the better your chances of unwrapping delicious rewards. So, are you ready to crush the holidays? Play the Holiday Crush now. Download it from the App Store, Google Play, or Windows Store for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.